Oh, hi there. I'm back with the Deskpro 2000, all ragged and ripped apart because I have been doing some experimentations on it. And part of that experimentation is what I'm going to be doing today. I'm going to be using an ancient benchmarking program to compare the speed of all these Pentiums. It all started when I found in archives this disc, Windows Magazine Benchmark disc, for fine-tuning your system. Copyright 1993. Oh boy, this is old. Imagine fitting a 3D Mark on one floppy disk. Now, I wanted to do a video where I benchmark all these old systems that I've been working on and just like put them up against each other, but I can't find one program that'll run equally on the old systems as it does the medium systems as it does the new systems. It's like one or the other, but never both. And in fact, the Deskpro and the Pentiums is the only system that this will run on. I tried the identical install of Windows 98. I literally took the hard drive, put it on a Pentium Pro, and it errored. Something out of range, I don't remember. At any rate, it runs great on this system. So I'm basically going to be popping in these different various Pentiums and seeing what numbers it spits out. These numbers aren't going to be anything you can really find useful in real life. It's just going to be comparing them directly. So we have a variety to play with here. Here's a Pentium 100. That might be my original Pentium 100. I don't know. I don't remember it having that schmoo spot on it. Pentium 133. It's got a question mark. Maybe it's questionable. This Pentium 150 has an X on it. I wonder why it says that. Here is a Pentium 166 with MMX. You're gonna notice how profoundly different they are. You know, that has the old school ceramic package where the die gets installed underneath, and these guys, it looks like they got the die in from the top and have a more traditional looking heat spreader design on this, well, I don't know what that is. Some sort of plastic, poly, PA66 glass fiber reinforced, I don't know. You'd have to ask AVE. But these are the ones with MMX. Supposedly a little bit more powerful even at the same clock speeds. That is the AMD K6 200 with schmoo on it that I don't want to remove because it's still good and it's going to go back into this system. And then finally, a 233. That's as fast as they get right there, boy. So we got to start off by chucking that 100 in there some way, somehow. I'm sure it's a really straightforward process. We're going to start off with the 100. And this heatsink I have here kind of has the, you know, a thermal pad pre-applied, so that should solve some of our problems from the start. Oh, we have to RTFM. And by RTFM, I mean read the inside of the panel, where they were nice enough to give us a jumper chart telling us all what settings to dial in. So if we want a 100, then it's on, off, on, off. That's a 50 front side bus with a 2.0 multiplier. Just reach on in there, flip the little dippies. On, off, on, off. That should do. All right, so let's fire her up, see if she posts. Ah, yes, looks good. Booting feels a bit slower already. All right, now let us embark on the clickening. Oh, look at that. It wants to go a full test. I swear this is like the first time you run it, it does this, but okay. And this is in real time. Watch this. Watch this. 6 seconds. Burp. Oh, if you blink, you miss it. Oh boy. Very old graphics test. WinTube system tests are complete. Would you like to save the results? No, your file system is weird. Since first time using, we'll now give you a short guided tour of its features. Blah, 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 blah. Oh, okay, that's great. It appears to be testing the video card too. Give us some charts, bud. Oh wow, look at those. They make me look very well endowed indeed. But then we're comparing against a 386, a 486, and a 486DX50. So yeah, considering this is a Pentium 100 and that's a DX50, I'm gonna say that the 100 is more than twice the speed of the 50. I guess that shows you the scale of the generational changes. Ah, yet another chart that's, oh, Word macro Excel performance. Oh, so here are the numbers, which I've got a spreadsheet ready to log them down. So this is the P100. 102.236 MIPS. Not quite sure what a MIP is, but I have seen that come up in other benchmarks. 21.277 megaflops. That's a term I've heard before, even though I don't know what it means. And that video is giving us 10.193 megapixels a second. Again, I'm not familiar with what these numbers mean. But our disk speed, 12.906 megabytes a second. It's funny that they'll measure the disk speed, and it gets even funnier later. Now we're gonna move to the Pentium 133, the classic, many people's first Pentium. Flop that out. It's cool to the touch. Oh, what's the manual say, bud? Off, on, off. At least it has dip switches. Usually there's jumpers and you gotta go in there with little tweezers and all right, now at 133, let's take a look. Oh, one thing you do notice is it totally reports the processor speed wrong. But hey, what do we got here? 134.454 for the MIPS. You're gonna notice the MIPS seem to scale proportionally to the megahertz. 100 MIPS, 100 megahertz. 133 megahertz, 133 or 134 MIPS. That's funny. We're up to 28 flops. 12 megapixels and 17.261 megabytes a second in the hard drive, which is funny. It does seem that our hard drive speed is CPU bottlenecked at this level of hardware. Like literally, we are seeing the hard drive speed increase with the processor speed, which is kind of amusing. Oh, we're gonna dial in some on, off, on for the 150. At 150, finally boot up starting to feel a little bit faster. Like literally, I'm starting to feel a difference in boot up time. All right, let's freaking test this, bud. Aha, aha. And once again, the MIPS are raising proportionally to the megahertz. Our flops are up to the 32s. Video performance is increasing too, though not as much. And again, the hard drive's going up, but not as much this time. Only went up by 1 point. Same with the megapixels. I guess the video card's starting to see the end of the CPU bottleneck, and the megabytes, well, performance doesn't differ that much. On to the 166, and this one's gonna be more interesting. We're installing that old 166, but we're not going to change the speed. Why, you might ask? Because debatably, the Pentium with MMX might be a slightly different architecture. So what happens if we run an MMX at the same speed as the original? Are we going to see a generational difference in performance even at the same clock speed? Let us find out. Oh, that's interesting. That is interesting indeed. We have actually seen a decrease in our MIPS, a decrease in our flops, a decrease in our megapixels, but oddly enough, an increase in our drive speed. Maybe that architecture, you know, helps data flow faster, but without setting the speed correctly. Now, that is assuming it's actually running at 150, because its performance is dumped down to the 133 band. The only thing I can think of happening here is because it's detecting that processor, maybe there are automatic switches in there that conflict with the dip switches, and because it's detecting that it's not a 150 with a 60 megahertz front side bus, it's automatically compensating, but selecting the wrong settings. I'm assuming both the 166 and the 133, they both use a 66 megahertz front side bus. But the 150 wants a 3.0 multiplier. This is actually running at a 50 megahertz front side bus right now. Oh, 150 supports both 50 and 60 megahertz front side bus. You know what? I think I did that 150 wrong. I think I ran it at a 50 megahertz front side bus when I should have been running it at a 60. I'm not gonna pop it in and find out because all the increases were proportional. But this generational change here, that's suspect to controversy. Let's switch it back up to the proper 166 it's supposed to be and see what happens. Well, I almost took the processor out as habit. I just need to switch the switches. All right, what will the 166 do, sir? Oh, wow. Profoundly different results. We got 181818 on the MIPS. Our increase is no longer proportional. It now exceeds the megahertz. And our flops, well, they increased maybe proportionally, not as profound as before. 37037, we're getting repetitive numbers here. I think you know it. 15162 on the megapixels, those are going up a little bit too proportionally. But in the hard drive department, we're jumping from 19 to 25. That's a huge change there, which might confirm the hypothesis that something about this processor is optimized for faster data flow. Even when it was in the neutered state that it was before, we saw an increase in hard drive, but now we're seeing a profound increase in hard drive now that it's set to its correct setting. Well, now we move up to 200, but that is the AMD K6. And because it's pre-schmooed, we'll just stick the pre-schmooed heatsink back on there. 200, what do we have here, bud? Off, on, and contact. Immediately, I feel the K6 runs a touch hotter. All right, let's see what this AMD can do compared to the Pentiums. Well. Our MIPS are scaling the same way the old Pentiums were, 200 for 200, but we dropped the flops, bud. Would you look at that? We're down to the flop performance of the 133. Oh. Video's good, still continues to rise. The hard drive is also going up proportionally. So it's supposed to have the MMX instruction set. Screw it, I'm calling it a construction set from now on. And I wonder if MMX has something to do with how it accesses the hard drive and streams the information, because that's part of what makes multimedia, the ability to stream it from the data source to the process. Now we're gonna do something a little bit different for the next test. You know, seeing as how we've had the flops of the 133, and the 133 also runs on the 66 megahertz frontside bus, I've switched this processor, the same AMD K6, down to 133. And I'm gonna test it and I'm gonna compare it against the 133 to see what kind of generational or what kind of actual differences we get between the K6 and the original Pentium. Here we go. Oh wow. These are definitely interesting numbers. We're seeing a proportional match in our flops. The 133 Pentium was 134 and the K6 is 137. So it's just slightly more powerful than the original Pentium, clock per clock, but still equivalent. Now, we did see a significant generational jump going from original Pentium to MMX, but we're almost seeing like the K6 designed to compete with the Pentium is on par with the original Pentium and probably not so much the MMX. Our flops are a flop, which as you read from the up here, it's the math coprocessor. So the math processing in the K6 is nowhere near as good as the processing in the actual Pentium. However, because of the advantages that it have, our megapixels are staying up there, even exceeding that of the Pentium 150. But where it gets really interesting is our hard drive performance. It's staying up in the 25s, competing with the Pentium 166, and not much of a decrease from its actual 200 megahertz setting. Interesting results. As you can see, even though it's a competing processor, they are very different in ways and do give different results. All right, on to the 233, which is also pre-schmooed, so I'll be using this same heatsink. We're gonna do a little bit more of our tomfoolery because we're gonna do 3 tests of this processor. For one, it's still at 133, so let's see what kind of speed difference we're gonna get going from this MMX 233 to the non-MMX 133. And I worded that sloppily, which I failed to rhyme because I said that word wrong. All right, our chart's starting to get a bit muddled. Look at that. This does eliminate some margin of error. Pentium 133, 134, K6 137, MMX 143, a 10 increase. And our math coprocessor, well, 28 here, 30 there. Video is all clocking in at about the same here. Just like with the K6, we're seeing a slight increase that the MMX offers. But the K6 beats out the Pentium in this category. It also beats it out in hard drive transfer speed. Look at that. It looks like the K6 does have some strengths over the Pentium in general. All right, for our next phase of tomfoolery, we've set the 233 MMX to 200 to see how it's directly going to compare with the K6 clock per clock. Ho, boy. Just as is the theme of AMD versus Intel until recently with the Ryzens, and back in the early K8 days, MMX. Intel narrowly beats out AMD in IPC's clock per clock, going 2.7 to 2.17. 10-point lead. And of course, what we already know is the flops are astronomically higher. But here in a surprising upset, the megapixels have decreased. K6 maintains just the slightest blonde one of a lead over the MMX. But then of course, that could be margin of error. And also is consistent with the strength that the K6 has. We're also seeing more megabytes per second, which, you know, I'm gonna give that one to K6. The megapixels could be margin of error, but that hard drive, I don't think that hard drive result is a fluke. I think genuinely whatever the K6 is doing, it just flows that drive a little bit better. But now we're going to max this pupper out and see what it can do, which also maxes out this system in general. Oh, the moment of truth. Not quite the final test, but it's funny because you can see the tests actually run faster, specifically the graphic test. Oh, what? Huh. Now with the K6, we saw a proportional speed and a slightly exceeding speed with the 200, but in this demonstration, our MIPS are up to 240. Yeah, okay. Okay, of course it's the best number on the chart, and our flops also blow everything away at 50. 50 flops. 50 flops, bud. 50 flops. Our video performance stayed virtually the same still in the 16, but it took that extra little bit of hardware to beat out the K6. Talking about beating out the K6, we've also seen that happen in the hard drive speed camp, finally reaching 30 megabytes a second, which might theoretically be maxing out the hard drive's potential. Those old ID hard drives, well, and the controller that would be on a Pentium era motherboard, 33 megabytes a second is the controller's rating, if I recall. I think it was much later in the Pentium 2 days that the ATA66 controllers finally came out. Now, we do have a wild card because I actually have in my collection two 233 processors. So let's flop this other one in and see if the results between them are consistent. I'll also use the different cooler. Even though these tests run so fast, I don't think it's gonna make a difference. Do you? Oh, okay, fine. We'll use the same cooler so everything's the same. Jeez. All right then. Survey says, we might be seeing some margin of error here, buds. We only got 231 on the MIPS. The flop stayed consistent at 50. The megapixels, she dipped down, saying that 16 is the prime, and all this 400, 200, 500 deal is probably margin of error, making the video performance of the K6 and the MMX, I guess, identical. And of course, hard drive stayed the same too, except for the decimal point. Let's run that test again. Yes, I know, in proper scientific theory, I should be running these tests several times and grabbing an average, and maybe even timing the computer so that I make sure it's at the same point of boot up every time. Maybe even let the system wait a few minutes, like 10 minutes or something, to make sure that Windows 98 stops screwing around. What just happened? Oh, by the way, they're called Pentium processors now. Yeah. We're seeing some magic voodoo happen here, bud. 253 on the MIPS. A sudden boost of power, but our flops are staying solid at 50. Suddenly, we have 17 in the video test, and our hard drive jumped to 38? What? How is that a thing that exists? Oh my. And that's with my Excel running. Okay. I'm gonna run the test one more time, with Excel closed this time, and see what happens. Tush 51 on the MIPS this time. Oh, suddenly we're getting 52 on the flops, 18 on the megapixels, and our hard drive stayed at 3848. Just how deep does this rabbit hole go? Let's run the test one more time for the second time. Pew! Well then. We're off the charts this time. Actually, literally off the charts. It looks like the formatting of my Excel spreadsheet. 253, 968, identical to run 2. Our flops gone back down to the 50. Our video performance dropped back down to the 16, but our hard drive performance stayed in the 38s. Well, that's just a yo-yo right there, bud. I don't know what to tell you. I'm gonna call it good here. Now let's move on to the bonus levels. We're gonna be plopping the old K6 back into here, and we're gonna leave it set to 233. What happens if we try to overclock this pupper by simply flicking up a multiplier? To the best of my knowledge, there's no voltage adjustments on this. Will it post? Let's press the button and see. Okay, we've got the video splash screen. We've got the system splash screen. We got the Windows 98 attempting to give her go. We've got it maybe taking longer. Yeah, I think we'd be booted by now. Well, this doesn't bode well. I'll wait a few minutes to see if it's going to go, but it looks like she's stuck here. But it's funny because she's not frozen. The little bar at the bottom still animating across. No, sir, I'm gonna say she's a fail at this point. Oh, what's this? Microsoft Registry Checker. Backing up, restoring. We found an error in your system files. Ha, ha, did we corrupt data? Oh my. Hopefully this hasn't completely kiboshed our sounds like I'm corrupt too. It's doing the registry checker thing again. Ho 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 ho. It said something different this time. Restoring files. That's 3 now. She got a boot this time. I think we done screwed her up, buds. We attempt to overclock it, she corrupted, which was something that was easier to do back then. But we seem to be in a registry boot loop here, so I think we're done. That's okay. That's okay. It wasn't exactly an exciting install of Windows to begin with. So I don't know what to tell you. I hope you had some fun here today. Welcome to the party. That is a lame thing to say, but it rhymed with the thing that I said before. So, small victory. Tune in next time when we'll do something much like this, except, you know, I might have a shed and workshop video first before I do another comp video. Just gonna have to deal with it. It's all interesting to me. And if you're anything like me, also to you. Yeah, she's done.